Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good day, whenever you are listening to this. Welcome to our second eCongress and to this Professional Development Day. Professional development is important to IFAJ, so I'm glad that we can arrange this, even if we can't meet in person. We have a very good program ahead of us with important topics and interesting speakers. For example, you can listen to how agriculture impacts the global trade, see how Belgium became a potato powerhouse, and hear about the Russian internet trolls who are a real threat to freedom of press and democracy. I'm sure you don't want to miss this, but I understand it can be difficult to attend the whole day. And as Hugh said earlier, we will be recording the whole day, so you can watch it from the website whenever it suits you. Thanks to all the organizers, presenters, moderators, our global office, and everyone else who have made this possible. Enjoy the day.
Okay, thank you, Lena. So now I'm just going to put up the program for us, just to get us started. Okay, so just to run through the day, of course, we've had the welcome. We have a panel, we have a presentation session on agricultural trade, which is going to start in a few minutes, followed by a virtual tour of Belgium, potato powerhouse, and then another panel with climate change and agriculture, which all those times are GMT. Take us through to about 12:30, and we're going to take a break. Some of us will need some sustenance to keep us going for the rest of the day, and then we'll come back at 1:30 GMT to talk about rural youth and agriculture in the post-COVID era, and to close the day presentation on freedom of the press with a couple of people who are actively involved in that whole dossier. So it will be a very jam-packed day. So please feel welcome to stay with us for the whole day if you can. If not, come and go as you please. Everything will be recorded. So if there's a session that you miss and you'd like to catch up, it will be posted next week on the IFAJ website. So I'd just like to go into the intro for the first session. Oh, sorry, it's the wrong one. There we go. Thank you. So unfortunately, Jane Craigie, who was going to be the moderator today, has no internet, which is unusual at the best of times to have nothing, but until she can get a technician over in a while and get it fixed, hopefully she'll be back for this afternoon's presentation on rural youth. But as a standby, and I'm eternally grateful, Steve Werblow is here, so he can act as the moderator in Jane's stead. We have two presentations, one from Phelim O'Neill with the Irish Farmers Journal, who's going to talk about many of the ins and outs related to Brexit, and I guess along the lines of be careful what you ask for when you change a very significant trade agreement. And then the second part will be an interview with Carlo Dade on the Belt and Road Initiative and the implications for agricultural trade with China. So Steve, at this point, I'll hand you over, and you can do your introduction of Phelim, and we'll connect him up with his PowerPoint, and we have about 50 minutes for the entire session, and the interviews around 20 minutes afterwards.
Sounds great. Well, I appreciate your being here, Phelim, and Carlo. I actually do not have introductory materials, so we're going to just go right into the opportunity to introduce yourself, if you don't mind, and we'll be listening in and moderating from there. But thank you for being here, and please take the mic and tell us tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll take it away.
Okay, do we have a running order? Do I go first?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I believe you do.
Okay, right. Let me just okay, I've just got a couple of slides by way of background, I hope. Okay, so listen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending what part of the world you're in. As has already been said, I'm Phelim O'Neill from the Irish Farmers Journal. I know, Hugh, you sent out a little resume of everyone that's speaking today overnight, so I won't bother repeating the details of that, other than to just say that I've been working with the Farmers Journal now for a number of years, having previously worked around the agri-food industry on the beef side for most of my working life in one way or another. It is indeed an honor to get the opportunity to engage with colleagues that are involved in communication about agriculture from around the world. Our sector is regularly misunderstood, particularly in mainstream media, never mind the whole social media space. And I think it's our job as communicators in the sector to ensure that the debate about the place of agriculture in the third decade of the 21st century is informed by facts. It is the sector of society that provides the raw material for much of the food that everyone consumes. But I would also caution that while we seek to communicate its importance, we should never, ever shy away from being honest and frank in our communication, calling out bad practice where it's found, anytime it's found. I've been asked to speak about the trade in the European Union and the aftermath of the UK leaving the EU single market and customs union, which came into effect at the start of this year. And given where I'm from and my employer being the Irish Farmers Journal, the thoughts that I'll share with you are very much what I see through an Irish lens. I'll focus on the impact of Brexit on trade between the EU and the UK, including the special arrangements that have been made for Northern Ireland. This is where we...
Yeah, your slides are not showing yet. You need to click on something.
Oh, they're showing with me now, so...
We see your screen, but not the slides.
That's not coming through there, Hugh, no?
Am I the only one who doesn't see the slides?
I don't see him either.
No, I can't see them either.
Maybe disconnect the share and try again.
Okay. Stop share. Apologies for this, folks.
Not yet.
I suppose technical problems are the theme of the day, so it would be I just think that I wasn't part of it. Is that working at all?
Yeah, right. We're good.
Okay, right. Listen, I'll just leave it there then for now. Okay, so right, the point that I got or I was about to make was that the impact of Brexit, and the special arrangements that have been made for Northern Ireland. Now, again, I know for many of our global audience that this conundrum is something that may not have occupied much of your bandwidth in recent times. So just to explain very briefly, Northern Ireland is the part of the United Kingdom that is also part of the island of Ireland, and the only place apart from Gibraltar where there is a land border between the EU and the UK. And I suppose, like many borders around the world, this is quite a controversial border. It was created exactly 100 years ago when 26 of the 32 counties that make up the island of Ireland left the UK to go their own way to form an independent state. And that had meant then, until the creation of the single market in the early 1990s, that there was essentially a trade border on the island of Ireland. That period also coincided, I suppose, with a period of, there's been several outbreaks of troubles over the past century, and that would coincide with it. And this was a continual point of friction. The arrival of the single market and the customs union in the early 1990s at a stroke removed this, and trade was able to operate back and forth across the Irish border in a completely seamless way. And that was particularly welcome for agriculture, where there's huge flow of trade both ways. It is very much the island of Ireland a single market for agriculture and produce. 1/3 of all the milk that's produced in Northern Ireland, that's the part that's the shaded area, if you like, here in this, is processed in the Republic of Ireland, south of the border. 400,000 sheep go from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland as well for processing, whilst 450,000 pigs go the other way from south to north for processing, as indeed do 100,000 cattle. As I say, the creation of the single market removed the need for border controls in the island of Ireland. And then the challenge became what to do after the UK left the single market. And that was a major negotiating point ahead of the trade and cooperation agreement that was concluded between the UK and the EU. It was solved, or so it was thought at the time, by the creation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And this was to, if you like, enable Northern Ireland to continue trading in the EU single market, unlike the rest of the UK. But with Northern Ireland being treated as part of the single market, that meant seamless trading continued across the border on the island of Ireland. There was no restoration of the border controls that had been there for the first 70 years up until the 1990s. But what it introduced was EU border controls being carried out at points of entry to Northern Ireland. And this is a politically sensitive issue when the checks are being carried out on goods entering Northern Ireland from the other parts of the UK. And it extends to the fact that some products, such as fresh processed meats, are banned altogether. And I suppose in the wider things, in terms of being careful what we wish for when it comes to trade and trade arrangements and making major changes, a standoff has now developed between the UK and the European Union on the enforcement of sanitary and phytosanitary border controls between Britain and Northern Ireland. And extended grace periods are due to run out in most cases at the end of September this year. And the big issue, and again, the sector that we're from is part of it. It's the one that sanitary SPS controls apply to. The biggest problem is for goods of animal and plant origin, as they require a veterinary certificate for each individual consignment, whether that consignment be a 1 kilo package or a 20-ton container. Customs controls are more an administrative issue, and as there's no tariff or quotas for trade between the EU and the UK, then that is less of an issue in terms of dealing with at the border controls points. A major part of the problem with EU border controls is that they're designed for international trade of bulk commodities, 20-ton containers, whereas much of the trade between Britain and Northern Ireland is for small quantities or mixed loads of multiple products, each requiring their own veterinary certification. And that reflects the fact that many of Northern Ireland's supermarkets are supplied from distribution centres in Britain, and operating on full EU border controls means innumerable checks, innumerable certificates, and effectively makes that trade impossible, certainly commercially impossible, if not indeed practically impossible. It's been a similar problem for British exports to the European Union. British exporters from Great Britain, from England, Scotland, and Wales, they have faced the problems with bureaucracy of border controls, and the effect there has been a huge drop-off in trade, particularly for smaller export businesses. On the other hand, EU exporters to the UK have not yet had any issues with border controls, and that's quite simply because the UK will only start introducing border controls, SPS controls, at the beginning of October this year, with physical checks to follow on the 1st of January 2022. This will present another and a particular difficulty for Ireland, as the UK is the largest destination for the exports of agriculture and produce. Businesses are familiar with the export procedure, as all sectors of Irish agriculture export beyond the UK and European Union. It is just that the sheer volume of certification that will be required that will put a big extra strain on the businesses, a big extra administrative strain. So that's a little bit, if you like, about the protocol, where it fits in and things. The Trade and Cooperation Agreement concluded on the Christmas Eve last. It does provide for a basic agreement that has no tariffs and no quotas for product that is going back and forth between the UK and the European Union. And that was something that was of huge concern to Ireland, because if that had happened, Ireland was going to be absolutely crippled from the point of view of agricultural produce. I'll just try and bring it up here, if that works. The reason for that is if there was no trade agreement between the EU and the UK, and we were working with full tariffs being applied, Ireland, despite only having 5% of EU trade with the UK, would actually carry 19% of all EU tariffs that were paid. And if we compare that with, for example, Germany, who is the biggest trade partner in the European Union with the UK, having 28% of all EU business with the UK, they would be paying just 17%. And that is simply because such a high volume of Ireland's trade with the UK is for agriculture products, and they carry, in terms of WTO tariffs, they carry the biggest tariffs by far. And I thought the other interesting thing to note in this was that in terms of the EU countries that are exposed to trade with the UK, the 7 countries would pay 83% of the tariffs. And that means basically that of the EU 27, 20 countries in it would have little impact from Brexit from a trading perspective, even if there was no deal. It is the 7, I suppose, closest countries to the UK, and as I say, with Ireland at the top of that list. Just then, to briefly reflect on, what else this means apart from the direct consequences of it. The EU have several different types of trade deal with external countries, and more are in negotiation. Comprehensive deals are in place with Canada and Japan, and a deal with the Mercosur countries has been concluded, though not yet approved. The UK are now out and have started making their own deals separately from the European Union, and they have already concluded the first one of these, a major deal with Australia. The view in Ireland, and indeed much of the European Union, is that Australia have done exceptionally well in this negotiation from an agriculture perspective, with huge access for beef and sheep meat secured. And this will have a particular consequence for Ireland, who currently supply up to 80% of the UK's imported beef requirements, and the UK consume 20% more beef than they actually produce. This market space is about to become much more competitive with Australia's entry into that market. And I suppose what is also of concern to Irish farmers is that it won't be just Australia, because the view is that the Australian deal sets the bar on expectations that other countries will have in terms of securing access for agricultural produce. And with the trade deal with New Zealand, that's now very close to conclusion, and an indication by the UK that they're willing to negotiate with individual Mercosur countries, not just with Mercosur as a bloc. The UK marketplace could become a crowded place, very crowded place, much sooner than maybe was expected, and this would have a particular serious knock-on effect for Irish exporters, to say who are the top supplier of imports to the UK. I know it's also, and it would have been interesting if Jane had been on here to get a UK perspective on this, because I know UK farmers are also concerned by the UK open door approach for agricultural produce and trade negotiations. but they do have considerable protection from the fact that the UK retail sector are very loyal to UK production. And I suppose there's also a twist in the whole issue in that whilst the UK market will open up to global suppliers, the UK has full non-tariff, non-quota access to the rest of the European Union as per the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. So we can actually see then potentially perhaps something of a revolving door that the UK will import considerable additional product, and they will actually perhaps get into exporting more to the European Union at the same time. So I suppose just to wrap up these remarks, then, you know, the post-Brexit world will be a very different place for Irish agriculture. There's a framework in the protocol for continued uninterrupted trade on the island of Ireland that will hopefully continue, and the teeth and problems can be worked out. However, UK trade policy will create huge competition for Irish exporters. This has been happening, of course, progressively within the EU with trade deals, but at a much slower pace, and with more controls and restrictions in place. The effect of UK trade policy is that it's likely to hasten the move to beef and sheep meat trading at world market prices, as has been the case with dairy, pig meat, and grain. For major exporting countries outside Europe, that'll be welcome news, less so within the European Union, where the burden of production controls on farmers are considerably greater than elsewhere in the world, and they are probably likely to increase further as the EU's farm to fork strategy becomes implemented. That finishes just in terms of my opening remarks, but happy to take any questions, and indeed happy for anyone that wants to make contact on any issue, either now or at a future point. p.o'neill@farmersjournal.ie will get me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Phelan. That was fascinating, and you packed a lot of information in a very short time, and very informative. We have a couple of minutes for questions. If anyone has questions for Phelan, either raise your hand using the little reactions button, and I'll call on you, or type a question into the chat. Just to get things going on questions, I noticed I had a little bit of internet difficulty at your last couple of minutes, but you mentioned
Seems the gremlins are with us.
Yeah. I think I see, Hugh, that there's one question there in the chat.
Let's have a look. So yes, the question is, will the September transition deadline be extended once more?
Again, I can't.
if so,
I suppose just to pick up on that question, Hugh, whilst you wait there. I think you know that will be a big part of the negotiation. There's a standoff in place at the minute between the European Union and the UK. Both sides set out position papers ahead of the August holiday, where politics, if you like, takes a break in this part of the world. And that, I think, will become a major focus now of a negotiation to try and hammer out some sort of a workable arrangement in September. My guess is that both sides will be anxious to avoid rolling extensions, if you like. But what would be, I think, a big push made to have a more permanent arrangement. And again, it's interesting to note that I know from an administrative point of view that a recruitment process is going on for senior civil servants to implement this process. So I would say the straight answer is an extension will be granted if necessary, but I think it would be the ambition that a more comprehensive operational agreement will be put in place.
Okay, good. Thank you. There's another question in there. So how are Northern Ireland farmers reacting? Or are they lobbying? How are they pleading their case?
And Northern Ireland farmers have been relatively passive in this matter because apart from the issue of getting stock back from the rest of the UK, from shows, etc., the day-to-day impact on them has been negligible. The Northern Ireland Protocol has been a politically sensitive issue at big politics level, but operationally for business and farmers on the ground, they have a remarkable resilience in how they adapt to whatever circumstances they have. And I think there's a recognition at a farming and certainly at an industry level that Northern Ireland is in a particularly good place in that they have full uninterrupted access to the EU market as well as the UK market. And the issue with the operation of the agreement is not in terms of what goes out of Northern Ireland, it's what comes into Northern Ireland. And I think if that conundrum can be solved, then that the protocol or a variation of the protocol, I think can be the basis for that future trading relationship and managing that unique position that Northern Ireland's in there, where it shares the land border with the European Union.
Steve, are you back? He was. I could see his eyes moving, but now he's not. Okay, another question.
I am trying to be back. I'm trying to switch to my hotspot, but that's not working. So I may or may not succeed with this. So, Phelim, we saw, oh, here, we have a question from Chris McCulloch. Have you any figures to support the increase in agri-trade between Northern Ireland, UK, and the Republic of Ireland since Brexit? So statistics.
There are comprehensive statistics available there, Chris, but the reality is no, I haven't prepared them for this presentation. I was keeping them at a higher level rather than go into the gritty detail. But the usual source of statistics that are available in Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, or indeed the rest of UK would give the indication. And I think at a top level, it has been clear that trade between the UK and the European Union, including the Republic of Ireland, has dropped from the point of view what the UK has exported. Trade on the island of Ireland has increased significantly. Again, it's very early to draw any conclusions, however, on what might be the long-term effect of this, because so far we really have just about 6 months of trade data. And given that there was a degree of stockpiling and carryover of stocks at the beginning of the year as people prepared for the change, we also have the effect of the pandemic that's still, it's affecting everywhere in the world. So I think it'd be very dangerous to draw too many conclusions on 6 months data, but the early signs suggest is that it is more difficult for UK exporters of agriculture produce to do business with the European Union. It hasn't happened vice versa yet, but the only reason it hasn't happened is because UK border controls haven't come into force fully yet. So, Phelim, I've got one for you, and that is around Christmas, New Year's. We saw tremendous backline, lineups of trucks. And that it was clear that there were huge delays that you had alluded to early in your talk. Have those lines cleared up? Has there been, and if they have, is it because of a reduction in the movement of products, or is it because the controls are, although they're still sound like they're very strict and very onerous, have they become more efficient? The Christmas problem was very much related to the pandemic and difficulty of getting entrance into France. That was caused the backlog. Now, again, that was, if you like, a test project almost for what delays might happen in the post-1st of January situation when the new trading arrangements came into place. So far, there's been no delays of any great significance. A part of that is, yes, less trade. There's been no delays or little delays coming into the UK because the UK have not yet introduced border controls. And I think as is always the situation with trade and businesses, they do find a way to make things work. It might add cost, it might add bureaucracy, it might mean less product choice and less product availability in some cases, but by and large workarounds are found. And the good and increased port capacity has been added certainly at the EU end to take in the border controls, and I know additional storage capacity or parking lot capacity has been added at the UK and is being added at the UK end. So the issue of Christmas was very much pandemic related. So far, similar types of delays haven't happened, and they're not expected, I don't think, either at any time in the immediate future. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe just to wrap up, last summary, are there any lessons learned for other nations that want to take the plunge and drastically change their trade relations?
Yeah, I think the lesson from this is that in terms of making a major change, and this is the first trade agreement in history, probably, that reverses back to a previous position. Most free trade agreements, or most trade and cooperation agreements that are concluded by countries and nations around the world, move to freeing trade between them, to removing barriers, to coming together, to create a coming together. Whereas this is the case of a member that has been part of a trading arrangement for 30 odd years, deciding to leave it, to reverse out, and that by its nature restores barriers. And I suppose for those of us that are old enough to remember the previous life when those barriers were in place first time round, it meant doing business was that bit more awkward, it was more cumbersome, it was more bureaucratic. And I think the thought that maybe in this here, before you unravel something or unpick something, that you probably need to put a degree of planning and forethought into it before you actually do it. And the thing I suppose about Brexit that was unique in that a decision was taken in principle, and it was only after that decision was taken in principle that the debate took place on what effect that decision should take. Should it be a close relationship maintained, or should it be a distant relationship? And as it turned out, it's quite a distant relationship. That brings non-tariff trade barriers, as a matter of fact. And look, it remains to be seen over the remainder of this decade if the discussions will lead to if you like, more of a coming together whilst retaining the political separation, or if they will indeed stay in place. Industry, I know, in general, want less barriers rather than more. So I think if I was asked to sum it up in one line, Hugh, I would be saying is, look, before you make major change on matters like this, think very, very carefully as to what the knock-on effect will be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, before you make that commitment.
Great, thank you, Phelim.
Okay.
It's a good overview, and certainly I think some good advice for countries that will be thinking about these similar type. Think ahead. How unusual.
Okay.
Maintain good relationships. Sounds pretty basic. Great. Well, yeah, feel free to stay with us as we go into the next session.
Hugh, have to actually drop out here for half an hour, but I will log in back after that for the next session.
Great. Thank you, Phelim. And everybody, if you have any questions, you can always contact Phelim directly.
I like you put my email address into the chat here before I leave.
We're going to send out contact information to all.
Okay, then I won't bother. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
We've got all that. Thanks. And poor old Steve is joining our technological gremlins that we've got this morning. So we'll keep on going. All right. So the second half of our presentation this morning, this afternoon, this evening for some of you. I'm just going to put up on the screen. There we go. So the next session is impacts on agricultural trade. Carlo Dade, unfortunately, he had a change in schedule and was anticipating not being able to connect this early in the morning, so we did a recorded interview. I'm going to pop in the chat box in a couple of minutes a reference document that you can use afterwards. And so what we did was late Friday evening was we recorded the interview so that we could have his presentation. And just going to stop share. And there we go. All right, so we have a YouTube video up. Yell at me if you don't see it.
Oh, it's there.
So agriculture is a basis for engaging with China. Where do we start?
Have we started?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, that was okay. So, you know, in the Canadian context, the question is extremely important. It grows out of the attempts to diversify Canada's agricultural exports. 50% of Canada's agri-food exports go to the U.S., and this has always been a concern. The U.S. is a great market unless you're trying to sell beef and they impose country of origin restrictions, or you're trying to sell softwood lumber and they put on restrictions, illegal according to the WTO, to NAFTA tribunal's restrictions. So these worries about the idiosyncrasies of the U.S. market has had Canada looking to export. China, the largest consumer for a lot of what Canada produces. China, a country that is now has left absolute poverty behind and is firmly in the global middle class camp. It has been a natural place to look for growth. So Canadian exports to China have been growing about 12% a year over the past decade. So for Canada, it's been very important in terms of being able to grow agricultural exports, but also with worries about dependency on the U.S.
But China is also of interest to many countries. Does it become a competition of who can play one against the other to get in there?
Now, that's not unusual in terms of global markets. Buyers and sellers have certain strategies that tend to be standard or just part of human nature. And you know, there is the approach of a country like, say, Japan, long-term relationships, valuing quality, valuing certainty, and other countries that are too numerous to mention, where it becomes a race to the cheapest price. How can we cut a couple cents per ton off of what we're buying? And I think the struggle from the agriculture exporter perspective is, how do you work your way towards those better customers? In the Canadian context, you know, the relationship with Japan and also with the Americans, despite the problems we have, is an indication of some success. But you know, the problem with Canada is our trade infrastructure. And we've reported extensively and have an extensive research program on this at Canada West. If you look at the World Economic Forum, the World Bank logistics, just examples of two indices, you see that ratings of confidence in Canada's trade infrastructure have plummeted in the last year in the World Economic Forum's rankings. So, you know, we do have problems on that front in Canada, and we really don't pay enough attention, I think, to the foundational elements of trade, which is not just production, which is not just variety, which is not just quality. All of those things mean nothing if you can't get goods to market. And I'm sure the Brazilians could give you chapter and verse on why that's a problem. But it's also a bit of an issue. It's becoming a bit of an issue up here in Canada. One that I think we can nip in the bud if we devote some more attention to it. But it's not the focus, unfortunately, of attention in Canada right now. Sorry, I should also note that this is a government issue. The private sector is fully invested in this. The ports, the railroads are spending massively on infrastructure, but it's the government role that's really lacking in Canada. The ability to coordinate investment, to set priorities, to make trade infrastructure a national priority for a country that exports as much as Canada does. It's the government role in guiding, setting policy, working with the private sector that's really missing. But that's a side note to China, but it's an important one for Canada.
Well, also a contrast when you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, so-called, to build infrastructure of all kinds right through the heart of Asia and into Eurasia and Middle East, and obviously through the land and the sea routes into Africa. They seem heavily invested in infrastructure. What are the implications there for agriculture?
Well, that's an excellent observation, and it's one that we're trying to bring to Canadian audiences. The fixation in Canada is on the bilateral trade relationship with China. Are we too dependent on China? Have we become too dependent on the Chinese market for peas, for canola? But we tend to miss the implications of China as the world's largest economy and the largest producer and consumer. As obsessed as are we in Canada with diversifying our markets, China, if you look at the 5-year plans, is equally obsessed with diversifying its sources of agricultural produce. In Canada, we have trade commissioners, government agents who try to open markets and assist companies getting into new markets. In grain and agriculture, that's really not needed. Richardson and Viterra can take care of opening markets for themselves. But nonetheless, the levers that we have in Canada to facilitate diversification are really, really limited. China, on the other hand, as you mentioned with the Belt and Road Initiative, can put trillions of dollars into literally opening new markets by creating the infrastructure, funding the infrastructure to allow products from regions that were essentially off the global market to come into the global market. The best example of how this works is with soybeans and Brazil. If you think back to the 1970s, when President Nixon cut U.S. soybean exports, suddenly, one of the many things that Nixon did, cut soybean exports, the Japanese suddenly found themselves cut off from one of their largest suppliers of soybeans. And at that time, I forget how much of Japan's soybean imports are coming from the U.S., but it was substantial. In response, Japan decided that they could no longer trust the U.S., so they began investing in soybean production in Brazil. The Japanese International Cooperation Agency came out of this experience, for example. But Brazil went from producing very few soybeans to nowadays rivaling the U.S. as one of the largest producers and exporters. So you can see what can happen when one country, concerned with diversification of supply, invests in one crop in one other country. What China is doing with the Belt and Road is doing this across many crops, across many countries. So even if China is only hitting 1 out of 10 on this Belt and Road projects, that's still, looking at the example of Brazil and soybeans, it still has potential to really disrupt markets. So Kazakhstan and wheat, legumes or pulses coming out of the Black Sea, these are things that aren't currently on the minds of Canadian producers, but they really should be because of the Belt and Road Initiative.
And so, well, I mean, trade is, there's two sides to the balance sheet always, right? And so what's good for one, perhaps for the other. So am I reading this right, that infrastructure is potentially going to be good for areas like you mentioned, Kazakhstan, Africa, others that have not traditionally been exporters, and it opens the market? But then for others like Canada, what are the implications for what had been perhaps not a secure market, but a steady market over the past few years? Can they pick and choose?
Well, it's going to affect global markets. Obviously, China's bringing production online primarily, we think, to improve food security in China. You can do that by having supplies guaranteed for China, or you can do that by influencing global markets to the point where there is more abundance and you can get at food security that way. I don't know how this is going to play out, but we can certainly see the building blocks of what's being assembled. Even though we don't know what the final structure is going to be, you can see some of the blocks and you have kind of an idea. And again, the Brazil example with soybeans, I think, is an object lesson, if not illustrative, for where this could go. Don't count on things not to change. And you know, the real issue is, it's amazing. We talk to people about the Belt and Road Initiative, and the knowledge of it is very, very low in the agricultural producing communities. The knowledge of the 5-year plan in Canada, I joke that if you ask most folks out in Western Canada, 5-year plan, they'll say Chinese, it's 5 years and it's a plan. That sort of level of detail is going to get us into trouble, especially because China is telling us in the plan what they are going to do over the next 5 years with a degree of certainty we do not have with the Americans. American foreign policy, will it make it through Congress? How will it be changed? Will it last until the next Congress comes in a year and a half from now? So the uncertainty we have with the American market is really offset by very clear signals in China, but we're not reading them and not paying attention to them. The knowledge that these signals exist is low, let alone the use of these signals. So there's a heck of a lot more we could be doing and other countries could be doing to manage the rise of China, to mitigate potential disruptions, to move more quickly to new opportunities as the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity. As the world's largest economy shifts and the policies that it sets to manage its growth and shifts are evident for us to use.
So farmers are always facing uncertainty, number one, from the weather, right? From one season to the next, even local markets. What should they be paying attention to become better informed or have a better understanding of where China's Belt and Road Initiative may lead them to?
So I think there are certainly sources of information. There are monitors. Our good friends at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in DC do a lot of work on the Belt and Road Initiative. There are a couple others globally. That information really needs to be translated more for the agricultural community, made easier to read. This is a project we're engaged in at the Canada West Foundation, trying to look at the 5-year plan, figure out what's important for Western Canadian interests, focus on those and translate that literally and figuratively, translate it so that it can be used by producers and exporters. That's the type of work that really needs to be done. I don't know the extent of information in other countries, but I know in Canada, we have very good information at a very high level, the pinhead level. People like me and other sinologists and experts who hold a conference in Ottawa or Montreal every year for other academics. The knowledge exists there, but it's not translated, again, literally and figuratively translated to where it can be used. And I would say that that's a major project that needs to be undertaken, certainly in Canada, and I would guess elsewhere. You know, we're used to having the US as the world's largest economy and mover of markets. We now have a completely different economic governance system. It's not the old Soviet system, and it's certainly not the American system.
Yeah.
This is a completely different system. And I think Australia is probably a bit more up on this. The Kiwis are probably a bit more up on it, but certainly here in North America, we are not. And we really have to do a lot, not just capacity building, mind you. And my academic friends say, we need to increase knowledge, we need to increase research. And I pull out my hair, which is very difficult given how short it is, but say, no, we need to produce knowledge that people can use and to work with them to actually use it. Huge difference. And that's what we're looking at. That's a project that we're looking at the Canada West Foundation, and we're talking about in Western Canada, but I would say that would be a model. And agricultural journalists are key on this. So in Canada, we work very closely with Real Ag Radio. We work very closely with Glacier Farm Media. Glacier Farm Media is actually a member of the Canada West Foundation. And we work very closely with them in reality checks on the research. Can it be used? Can it be understood? Are we getting it out? And I say that that's a model that's a hell of a lot of work. It's not always a hell of a lot of fun for journalists that like traveling to capital cities. You've got to get down to the smaller farm communities, which we do, and talk to folks. But I think that's the only way to really do this.
Is there anything then, as this knowledge gets transferred, mobilized, is there anything that farmers should be thinking of over the short term, 2 to 5 years, let's say, that they should be adapting to, planning for, investing in? What should they be doing to respond to this opportunity?
Well, here in Canada, the farmers, the information that they get is important to understand the larger picture in where things are going to go next year or the year after. The ability to use that information at the farm level is constrained by intermediaries. Farmers sell the elevators, they don't sell the countries. So selling to the local elevators, selling to with the grain companies as intermediaries doesn't give the producers a lot of leverage. But interestingly, what we're seeing that does change this is the diversification, not of markets, but the diversification of products. And this is something that we've been doing extensive research and advocacy on here at the Canada West Foundation. So, 70-some% of our peas go to China. It's worse than canola seed in terms of dependence on one market. So trying to find other markets globally to sell peas is very difficult. There are a limited number of markets for dry bulk peas. But we've begun turning peas into proteins, fractionation. We're creating the ingredients for Beyond Beef burgers. Those ingredients aren't going to China, which is already awash in plant protein because they've got all our dry bulk peas that they turn into pasta and they've got protein left over. But if you're in California and you're making a very high quality, very expensive consumer product like Beyond Beef, you're not going to buy bulk ingredients from China. You're looking at places that have reputations for quality, for assurance on health and other factors. Also, sources that are closer to market. So as we change the product mix, instead of just selling bulk peas, we sell bulk plant protein, we change markets naturally. For farmers, this means you're not driving just to the elevator, but you're potentially driving to the plant that's processing the peas into plant protein. That gives you leverage. That gives you a new opportunity. The same thing with canola. Rather than simply driving to the elevator to have it trained out to the port to go to China, you can drive to the crushing plant or put it in rail to the crushing plant and get a better return. You now have options. And that crushed canola, of course, is going to the US, where it will go into biodiesel. Corn and ethanol go for cars, canola and diesel go for trucks. So it's a separate market. We're not worried about competition with the Americans on that one. So we have the potential to move pretty much close to our entire shipment of canola seeds to China, to crush that at home and instead sell it to domestic markets. You take away the vagaries of international trade, and you also give producers options. So product diversification, as opposed to market diversification, is the real key. Product diversification can naturally lead to market diversification, but if you're producing at source, it also gives options for farmers. And this is something we're really, really excited about on the prairies. We did the foundational research on the plant protein opportunity for Western Canada, and we've been pushing more research and thinking about product diversification as a result of that experience.
The wild card in all this is the politics, and it's been quite volatile. The previous US administration tore up arrangements and agreements and other kinds of things that seemed almost at will. But this initiative is a huge amount of investment. I don't know what the billions of dollars worth that are going to go in, but it's more than just a trade agreement. What is the potential for political disruption in this, again, over the next 2 to 5 years, given the situation we're in?
So uncertainty with the U.S. has certainly grown, as has our awareness of uncertainty with the U.S. It's funny, with the new NAFTA agreement, the U.S. Trade Rep office, they modeled the benefits of the new NAFTA agreement. And the only way they were able to get positive benefits out of the agreement were to do a new type of modeling, factoring in uncertainty, the removal of uncertainty on digital trade. They really had to work hard to try and gin the modeling to come up with positive benefits. All of the modeling showed negative returns from the agreement. The agreement actually subtracted from welfare gains and other things. So this uncertainty with the U.S. is going to grow. It's going to continue to be a problem. And things like crushed canola and moving it across, you can only hope nowadays that it becomes so important for the Americans in terms of GHG reduction targets that it doesn't run afoul of canola, that it's allowed to go in. As long as the Americans really, really need something, you stand a fairly good chance of them not cutting it off. Of course, softwood lumber belies that argument. But what else are you going to do? You really don't have any perfect choices, or you don't have certainty. At the end of the day, when you look at all the factors, this one lines up as looking really good, and you've got to take that risk. But you also have to acknowledge the risk, and your point to acknowledge the risk is excellent.
So go just to conclude this conversation, going back to the beginning about the need to have more understanding of this Belt and Road Initiative and its implications. So where should agricultural journalists and communicators, what should they focus on to become better informed so that they can then, as you say, translate that information out to the audience, which ultimately is the farm and rural communities that are affected by this?
Well, it's the 5-year plan, I would argue, as much, if not more, than the Belt and Road Initiative. You can look at the Belt and Road Initiative as an implementation tool of policy objectives in the 5-year plans. So looking at the 5-year plan is a great place to start. The Chinese government publishes a summary of the plan, and they have one on the agriculture chapter. You'll also want to look at the national security chapter, where they talk about, well, food security under national security more than under agriculture. So there are certain sections that are digestible, and if you've got Google Translate, you can get more than a clear enough idea of what's in there. That's a good place to start. I don't know that anyone wants to read the thousands of pages of the plan or has time to read the thousands of pages, but there's some work being done on looking at the 5-year plan in agriculture. It would make a great symposium for the Federation to put together. We did a symposium at the Canada West Foundation on the 5-year plan and had one day on agriculture. So I would suggest that people may want to listen in on that symposium, that one day of the symposium, and I think that may give a start. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Aussies were doing a bit more of this, and that may be a source of information as well.
Great, thank you. You've given us some links. We're going to put them up at the end of this presentation and share them with the audience. So thank you for your time, and I'm quite sure that people can contact you directly if they have additional questions that they want to add. I'm sure we're going to be in touch again soon to keep track of this. I think it's a very fascinating development in the trade world that you're quite right, we haven't paid enough attention to recently.
Well, thank you. And again, you can also listen in to Glacier Farm Media. I don't know if I can give the particular outlet a shout. I think they do work with you. And Real Ag Radio. So if people want to hear other interviews, what some of their journalist colleagues are doing in Canada, those sources are good too to get some information from us on this. Indeed, they're good friends of IFAJ. So we'll get some of that information posted as well. Good, great. Thanks very much. Okay, pleasure.